As a researcher of labor and public economics, I'm mostly interested in three things that are essential related to basic income. And the three things are the basic income, the effects of basic income on employment, public finances, and the distribution of income and well-being in the society. And I will comment on your presentation from the point of view of standard labor and public economics theories. And I will also give some general comments, maybe more general comments rather than go into the most academic content of your presentation. The first thing that I will comment is on your thesis that there are some productive characteristics of individuals that are not compensated for by employers. And I won't comment on thesis on some non-productive characteristics. That means the characteristics or life activities that are not creating money. I won't be commenting on those, but I will comment on those activities which somehow create monetary value in the society. So that means the characteristics that and activities that can be in the end sold in the market. I take the standard wage setting theory of labor economics as my starting point. And from the standard theory we know that the wage of an individual is somewhere between her reservation wage and her marginal productivity. And I will explain this a little bit more. Reservation wage is the minimum wage level on which an individual is willing to show up at the workplace. The wage cannot be below that level because otherwise the worker doesn't show up and the production is not actualized. That is the lower limit of the individual's wage. The upper limit, or the upper bound, is the amount of money that the employer is going to get by selling the fruits of individuals' work effort in the product market. And if the wage would be higher than that, the employer would refuse to engage in that productive worker-firm match. So it has to be that the wage is above or minimally the reservation wage of the worker, and it has to be below, or the upper bound is the let's say productivity of the worker. And where in between these two bounds the wage will be in the end depends. This is kind of the basic labor market theory. The wage will be negotiated in the market, maybe through collective bargaining or between the worker and firm. And okay, now let's say that the worker has a lot of negotiating power, maybe through collective bargaining or strong trade union, or maybe due to competition between firms in the labor market, which means that the worker can make different firms to compete and to offer higher wages. In the case of strong negotiating power, it is clear that the wage will be really close to the upper bound of it, that is the productivity. And then the, let's say, rate of exploitation will be very, very low if you use Marxist terms. On the other hand, if the negotiating power is very low, that means that the wage is wages very close to the individual's reservation wage. So, if you talk about the productivity or the maximum that the firm is willing to pay for the work effort, that constitutes of every characteristic of the worker or of the job done that creates monetary value for the firm in the product market. So this means that all the characteristics of the worker, of the culture, of the product market, of almost everything that is related to market and production is materialized in the productivity or the upper bound of the actualized wage. So I think this is very much related to your thesis, because you're saying that there are things in life and in society that are productive in the market sense, but are not compensated for the worker. But I think that's only true when the worker doesn't have enough negotiating power to negotiate the kind of surplus to herself. Okay, that's my first point, and I think I'd like to see your analysis augmented with some comments on negotiating situation in the labor market. And I think Dr. Anna Kontula made an important point about basic income and negotiating power, that basic income could be one way to increase the negotiating power of individual workers. I think there are two different kind of types of negotiating power. One is the collective bargaining power, and the other one is on top of that, there's the individual negotiating power. And I think basic income probably could increase the negotiating power of each individual in the market, in the labor market. And an interesting thing related to basic income and negotiating power is what was called here before as the right to walk away from the workplace. And that's kind of part of the negotiating power that you have. And but now, as an economist, I'm interested in the employment and income outcomes of the basic income, the proposed basic income scheme. And what is important there is that whether the workers actually walk away from the workplace and stay out of the workplace and live on basic income, or whether they actually walk away from the workplace to get better wages, to negotiate better wages and work on those better wages. Because whichever happens and how many workers will do one thing or the other is contributing to the total income available in the society and the total employment level and the total tax revenue that from which the basic income will be funded. Okay, another thing I want to very shortly comment is the intellectual property rights. In some cases, individuals possess property rights. You may be a creative person who is able to innovate or create something that has a lot of market value, and sometimes it is discussed whether the employer should own these property rights or whether the individual worker has the right to own her innovations and her intellectual property. And okay, the third option maybe here would be that if the collective bargaining power is very strong, it's actually possible that neither the firm or the individual employer gets the fruits of innovative activity or intellectual property. And that's the case when through collective bargaining, actually the fruits of innovative, individual innovative output is actually redistributed to all workers. I think that's an interesting question these days. Okay, I think I'm only now talking about people who do work and earn wages. And I think what should be more included in your analysis, Andrea, is the people who do not work or only work occasionally. And why this is important is that because this is the population group that is usually considered as the most affected group by the basic income scheme. And in most practical basic income proposals, tax schedules are such that basic income is taxed away from most wage earners. Which means that, that basic income gives you negotiating power, but because you get it if you don't work, if you go away from the workplace. But if you work, it will be taxed away from you. This is why those who do not work are the people most affected by basic income proposal and the exact amount of money that basic income would be. And it seems to me that your thesis implies that individuals who do not work somehow contribute to production and thus to wages that are negotiable. So people who do not work somehow in your model somehow create value that can be sold in the market. So that raises an interesting question. What if I am the person who isn't working and I benefit someone else who is working and add the productivity of someone else who is working? How do we actually negotiate the benefit from my work that I do not get compensation for? And okay, if I realize that I'm actually benefiting someone else, and in monetary terms, why would I actually do it? And I find it a bit difficult to find examples of such situations where that sort of activities are done, and the cases where no one actually benefits from it. Let me give an example of that sort of thing. Let's assume a parent that is parenting a child. And let's assume that the parenting is such that it improves the productive capacity of the child when she grows up. And if she is working when she is an adult, it's almost by definition that her productivity is larger than it would be with worse parenting in the childhood. Now, again, with a strong negotiating power of the worker, she is able to extract that extra productivity from the employer and actually gets paid for the parenting which is done by the parent. So, in this sense, taking care of kids, for example, is or can be actually rewarded in the market, but the one who is rewarded is not the one who is doing the parenting, but the child. Okay. And again, this is conditional on sufficient negotiating power. So it somehow seems that all this discussion and all my comments are related to negotiating power. And in that sense, basic income proposals' effect on negotiating power from this perspective seems to be one of the most important things. Okay. On a more general note, this is not so much related on your thesis, but on maybe my work as a researcher. Again, I think it's important to give attention to the effects of basic income on the well-being of those who do not work. Or work only occasionally. Some proponents of basic income are reluctant to call basic income a form of social security. People say that, okay, social security is social security and basic income is something different. That might be true some way, but from the point of view of standard economic analysis, labels don't matter very much. What economists are usually interested is that, be it social security or not, we are interested in the effects of any policy proposal on general employment, general income, general well-being, and the distribution of well-being. So what we are basically interested in is who benefits in monetary terms and in non-monetary terms as well, which is a little bit difficult to measure, but can be done, for example, through happiness studies or subjective well-being studies. That's only one example. Okay. So I think all well-formulated basic income proposals can and should be evaluated using microsimulation and analysis that produces knowledge on the functioning of the labor market. And knowledge on functioning of labor market, by that I mean, for example, some estimates on how many people in the case of basic income would actually walk away from the workplace and stay out, and how many would actually just negotiate better ways and stay working and continue working. And it's also the analysis of the labor market is also should also include analysis of negotiating conditions in the labor market. And those are some conditions that may differ between countries, for example. It may be that the workers' negotiating power on average and for different groups may be different in Finland than in Italy. And one more thing that I would like to say is that, because usually the devil is in the details, that also applies to basic income. A lot of important features of basic income are those features that are usually considered minor, but are actually very important. For example, means testing. Most basic income proposals require unconditional basic income. This means that there is no means testing. And I think it would be interesting to look at more closely about the role of means testing in today's social security to understand what would be the changes if means testing is actually abandoned. So, and these sort of details are, I think, important, and especially important for from the point of view of groups, be they major or minority groups, and the well-being of these groups. Thank you, Andrea, once again for the presentation, and I think that's what I want to say.